I'm back. Mr. Clarke's back. Time to take a look at 15.3, Europe and the Muslim world. Some of the objectives we're looking at today look at how internal and external pressures shape the Muslim world. We'll identify the challenges facing the Ottoman Empire and Persia. We'll describe the ways Egypt tried to modernize, including the opening up of the Suez Canal. So you can even see in that map there, the orange area there would be the Ottoman Empire, kind of at its height and power. So looking at question 1, in the 1700s, where did the Muslim world extend? Muslim world extended from North Africa to the south to Southeast Asia, including parts of India, and created 3 giant Muslim empires: the Mughals in India, the Ottomans in the Middle East, and the Safavids in Iran. 2, what happened to the Muslim empires during the 1700s? All 3 were in decline. 3, what do the Battle of the Pyramids in Egypt indicate about European goals in the Muslim world? So we can see some of the imageries there. You can see the great pyramids there in Egypt. And you can see the French flag and the French army kind of rolling through parts of Egypt in and around the pyramids. And then you can see a much closer up view of the French military, the flag, and kind of a celebratory look there as the French military overran different parts of Egypt. So we look there at question 3. What are the Battle of the Pyramids in Egypt indicate of European goals in the Muslim world? Europeans would strike at the heartland, kind of the center, the real core of the Muslim regions. Illustration shows the Europeans using military force to do so, and the scale of the battle, never-ending people in the battle there, indicates that they met with strong resistance as they attempted to overrun the area. 4, what were the reasons for the decline of the Muslim empires? Central governments were losing control. There was a lot of corruption. Muslim scholars were preaching independence. There were a series of reform movements, just like we've been looking at reform movements in Latin America and other parts of the world. We're seeing reform movements here in the heart of the Ottoman Empire as well. In addition to that, Western imperialism began to break down controls. 5, why would Muhammad be especially effective at leading resistance against the British? Since Ahmed's followers believed that he was the Mahdi, the savior of Islam, they would follow his lead with kind of the power, religious fervor of unquestioned devotion. 6, at its height, what areas did the Ottoman Empire control? Well, we saw on the map before, very extensive empire extending in the Middle East, North Africa, and into southeastern Europe. 7, how did nationalist movements impact the Ottoman Empire? Small minority groups within the empire began demanding independence, and one by one they began to move forward towards this goal. 8, what Western reforms did the Ottoman Empire implement during the 1700s in an attempt to slow its decline? They put into effect a organized system of taxation. They tried to improve infrastructure, including transportation with railroads. They implemented a program of education, built up the armed forces. And some of the things they emphasized in regard to education included sciences and medicine. 9, what was the movement of Young Turks during the 1890s? This consisted of liberal Turks who demanded more modern westernization. However, despite overthrowing the ruling sultans, They could not achieve their goals because in 1914 they were pulled into World War One, or the Great War as it was called initially. World War One was the Great War. It became World War One after World War Two started, and the history books were being rewritten. 10. Traditionally, how did the Ottoman Empire treat other religious and minority groups within their empire? They allow them to live in their own communities and practice their own religions. 11. Why did the Ottoman Empire's attitude towards minority groups change? Well, strong nationalistic feelings during this period of time, during the late 1800s, led to hatred towards minorities, and for the first time, genocidal actions within the empire itself. What is a genocide? Hopefully something you're familiar with, something that's really a tragic aspect of world history. It's the systematic attempt to eliminate a particular religious or ethnic group of people. You target that group. It's not the random massacre of a large number of people, but rather the targeted killing of a particular group. That kind of is the big difference between simply a massacre, and a genocide. A genocide can be a massacre and they're killing a large number of people, but to make it a genocide, you have to specifically target a particular group. Okay. Some genocides throughout history that you may be familiar with. Obviously, the Holocaust from 1933 to 1945. The Rwandan genocide in Africa, 1994. The Hutu killed nearly 1 million Tutsi. They were rival tribes that during the period of time of imperialism in Africa, these two enemy tribes were forced to live together. However, after Belgium in the 1960s abandoned Rwanda, they left behind the Hutu and the Tutsi living in the same country. So basically, sworn enemies were now living together and forced to work side by side in the same country. Eventually, their hatred for each other got the best of them. And in a brutal attempt to eliminate the minority group, the Tutsi, the Hutu killed off a significant number of their population. And we'll next look at the Armenians, which were killed by the Ottomans in the late 1800s and into 1919. Looking at 14, they were Christian people living in the eastern mountains of the Ottoman Empire. What did the Ottomans do to the Armenians? During a 25-year period of time, over 1 million Armenians in the empire were killed. Compare and contrast the revolts against the Ottoman Empire in Greece and Armenia. Both countries wanted to gain independence from the Ottoman Empire. The Armenian revolt was brutally suppressed as the Turks enforced genocide on the Armenians, while the Greeks were successful in gaining independence. '17. What role did nationalism play in the Armenian genocide? Well, the Armenians protested the repressive Ottoman rule and sought their own state. The nationalist Ottoman Turks believed that the Christian Armenians were siding with Russians against the Ottoman Empire. The Sultan then killed thousands of Armenians, and hundreds of thousands more died of disease and starvation. Moving on now to 18. What Egyptian leader was the founder of modern Egypt? Muhammad Ali, who introduced a number of political and economic reforms. And some of the reforms included tax collection, reorganizing landowning systems, improving the system of agriculture and irrigation, He developed local industry and really is kind of looking to modernize Egypt during this period of time. 19, why do you think Muhammad Ali was able to conquer Arabia, Syria, and Sudan? Ali was an able leader who got Western experts to help him modernize his army. Arabia, Syria, and Sudan probably did not have effective leaders or modernized armies, so he developed a distinct advantage which allowed for him to push forward in some of his goals. Who started the Suez Canal project in 1859? The French entrepreneur Ferdinand de Lesseps. How did the construction of the canal impact trade from Britain to the Far East? Well, previous to the canal's construction, if you were living, let's say, in Southern Europe and you wanted to ship something to, let's say, somewhere here in the Middle East or maybe to India, you would have to actually sail all the way around the tip of Africa, which you can't necessarily see here, all the way south of the southernmost tip, around South Africa, and all the way north again along the other coast of North Africa, let's say, to get just to this one spot here. Now, instead, you can go directly through, and that can cut thousands of miles and certainly cut back on the expense and the time and the whole process of getting people and supplies from one spot to another. There's even a little more close-up map and a little more specific numbers here. So cut thousands of miles on the one-way journey. Price for transporting people and goods decreased. More goods are affordable, more widely available. And you can see that, let's say, going to India and Mumbai. And from London, instead of a 12,000-mile journey, it would be reduced to around 7,000 miles or cut 5,000 miles off the total distance. '22, why did the Ottoman Empire allow Britain to dictate policies in Egypt? Well, Great Britain had gained a controlling interest in the Suez Canal and had a lot of economic power. And after an Egyptian nationalist revolt, the British made Egypt a protectorate. Remember, a protectorate is when you're not necessarily colonizing that area, but you kind of take like a big brother role where you're kind of looking out for its best interest. In the event of a military invasion, you would come in there and literally protect that area, and you kind of give advisement and suggestions on how your government should be run. 23, how do the reasons for Russia's and Britain's interest in Persia change? At first, Russia was interested in gaining power in Persia to prevent threats along its southern border and to expand into Central Asia. Britain was interested in Persia to protect the interest in India. Once oil was discovered in Persia, both countries were interested in Persia's oil fields. '24, why might two groups of Persian nationalists have different views on how Persia should respond to Western imperialism? The more progressive Persians thought that was a way forward for Persia to modernize and make use of Western knowledge so they could control their own destiny. On the other hand, Muslims, who were more traditionalist, more conservative, they thought Western ideas were a threat to Persian identity and could break down their society. They wanted to get rid of all outside influences in power. And finally, the lesson reflection, what factors can lead to a nation committing acts of atrocities like a genocide? Well, social Darwinism, the idea that you kind of believe your people are superior to another group of humans. Obviously, prejudice and racism. Ethnocentrism, kind of believing your ethnic background is superior to another's as well. So any of these factors unfortunately contributed to racism, prejudice, and ultimately genocide throughout history. Hopefully you enjoyed our discussion today. Until next time, Mr. Clarke is out.